Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Data Playbook. This is week 8, and I'm going to go through every single matchup. I'm also going to go through these in the short form like I've done before, so it'll be up to you to pause and look at any relevant information that's important to you. I will try to highlight a few pieces, but I'm just going to run through them pretty quickly. Looking into the Buffalo Bills going to the Carolina Panthers, you have the Bills favored on the money line with a spread of 7 points and a total line of 47.5. Looking into our rankings, you have a scoring rank of 4 for Buffalo, which is pretty good, an allowed scoring rank of 17, so about average at stopping their opponents. They have a passing rank of 12 and an allowed passing rank of 4, so they're very good at stopping their opponents from passing. They have a rushing rank of 1, so they're best in the league at rushing, and an allowed rushing rank of 31, so they're almost the worst team at stopping the rush. And they have an allowed tight end rank, so they're very good at stopping tight ends, and they like to throw their tight end. For Carolina, you have a scoring rank of 23, so they're not very good at scoring themselves, but pretty good at stopping their opponents. Not a great passing game either, but a pretty good rushing game, and pretty bad at stopping the tight end. Just switching over to the averages too if you need those. A couple of these is that the allowed rushing rank of 31 is pretty bad, and that's reflected here, where they allow 156 average rushing yards per game. So they do let their opponents rush quite a bit. For the quarterbacks in this game, you have Josh Allen, and I'm going to look at Andy Dalton instead of Bryce Young because he's listed as doubtful at this point. So for Josh Allen, you have 133 total season fantasy points. That averages to 22.2 fantasy points per game. For Andy Dalton, you have only 8.4 total season points for an average of 2.8. No turnovers, though, from Andy Dalton, whereas Josh Allen has 4 interceptions and has lost 1 rushing fumble. And here's your averages for these guys, as well as their breakdowns for each weeks that they've played. And quickly looking at their carry share, you do have Josh Allen here with a large, almost 25% of the carries for the team on all their rushing attempts. So he does steal a little bit more than maybe you'd like as a Cook owner, but he does help open up the game some ways in that way too. For Andy Dalton, he does make it on the board here, but I'm guessing that's less than 1%. But if Bryce Young was in, you'd have a little larger percent, near that average about 8 or 9%. For the running backs in this matchup, you have James Cook, and Chuba Hubbard's listed as 1, but he does have a bunch of share with Rico Dotto still, so keep that in mind. James Cook has 104.6 total fantasy points this season, for an average of 17.4. Chuba has 63.6 total fantasy points this season for an average of 12.7. There are no turnovers between them. And then if I switch over to the averages too, as well as their weekly breakdowns if you need that. And as mentioned before, you have Cook at 57.8% of the carry share. But over here with Chuba, you have 32.6 for Chuba, 47.8 for Rico. Last week, Rico still owned the larger share too, but that might be because they were getting Chuba back into the game. So we'll see which back really ends up taking over here for Carolina. For your top receivers, you have Keon Coleman and McMillan, where Coleman has 57.7 total fantasy points this season, averaging 9.6, and McMillan having 83.3 total fantasy points this season, averaging 11.9. The only turnover between the two comes from Coleman on a receiving fumble, and then if you have their averages with their breakdowns, and if we look at the receiving share yards, you can see that Coleman gets a decent part of the pie with 16.5%, but there are a bunch of other players getting about 20, 18, 16, so the receiving share is spread out between a ton of different players in Buffalo. For Carolina, you also have the largest share going to McMillan with almost 30%, 29.4% to be exact. That is the largest share of anybody else on the team. So other than McMillan, it becomes spread out between everybody else. The number 2 receivers are Shakir and Xavier here, with Shakir getting 64.3 total fantasy points this season, averaging 10.7, and Xavier getting 43.2 total fantasy points this season with an average of 8.6, and no additional turnovers between either of them. And if we move over to their average yards per game and their breakdown of week by week if you need that. And then just looking into their shares, you have down here with Shakir getting 18.75% of the receiving yard share, and over here with Xavier getting 10% of the team's receiving share. And finishing out with our tight ends, you have Dalton Kincaid and you have Jatravion Sanders, with Kincaid having 66.7 total fantasy points this season, averaging 13.3, and Sanders having 20.2, averaging 5 fantasy points per game this season, with no other turnovers between the two. And slipping over to the averages, And once again, with their breakdowns here, we look down and right now Kincaid gets about 20% of the receiving air yard share for the Buffalo Bills. And Sanders has that much closer to average, I think, across the league I've seen, with 6.5% of the team's receiving air yard share. So there you have for this matchup. I think the things to note is that this rushing rank and allowed rushing rank, along with a good rushing rank from Carolina, might mean there's a lot of rushing in this game. Depends on how well they can shut down the passing from both teams, with Carolina not being a great passing team as it is, and Buffalo stopping the pass pretty well. So it all kind of depends on that. We'll see what happens. So there you have the details for this matchup. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did and you got something out of it, leave a like and subscribe, and leave a comment on what else you might want to see in the future. Other than that, thank you so much for watching.